Welcome, everybody, to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, igniting leadership excellence. I'm Rick, and this is my co host, Emily.
Welcome back.
Now, you don't have to be a firefighter to listen to our podcast because Emily and I talk about any and everything related to leadership. Today, we are welcoming a guest, retired Fire Chief Wayne Kewitsch, and I will read his bio here. Wayne says that he realized he's one of the luckiest guys in the world. He gets to do what he loves. Chief Kewitsch began his fire service career as paid on call firefighter in 1995 with the St. Louis Park Fire Department, has served as a firefighter, lieutenant, assistant chief, and fire chief for the Richfield Fire Department in Minnesota. He served as the first executive director of the Minnesota Firefighter Initiative, a nonprofit that focuses on firefighter health. Wayne is passionate about firefighter health and wellness, along with how resources can be best utilized to provide excellent service to the public. During his time with the Minnesota Firefighter Initiative, Wayne helped launch the implementation of the Hometown Heroes Assistance Program, a statewide program focusing on providing firefighters across Minnesota with resources to address their unique health needs. Wayne is currently serving as the Emergency Operations Director for the 2026 Special Olympics USA Games. He is a member of multiple fire service organizations and has held leadership positions with the Minnesota State Fire Chiefs Association, the Minnesota All Hazards Incident Management Team, and is a former board member for Minnesota Task Force 1. Wayne has a BA from Northwestern University and has successfully completed the Executive Fire Officer program at the National Fire Academy. Well, Wayne, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and for our listeners, Wayne and I first came in contact with each other and got to know each other at the EFO program, the Executive Fire Officer program at the National Fire Academy. So, Wayne, even though I read that bio, could you please fill in the blanks with your career?
Yeah, so firefighting was a midlife career change for me. I was an entrepreneur prior to that in the high tech field. And when St. Louis Park added a paid on call component, I was fortunate enough to be hired. And, I always wanted to be a firefighter. And when I was a little kid, I think a lot of good firefighters are born that way. They know what they want to serve. They know where they want to go. And that goes by and large for most people in public safety. So I was fortunate enough to get hired at St. Louis Park and get trained and spent a few years there. And then I decided I wanted to become a career firefighter and had the support of my family, my wife and my family. And I was fortunate enough to get hired at Richfield and had a great career there, just over 20 years. Learned a lot, and it was a wonderful, wonderful way to finish up that part of my life. So.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, Wayne, for people who may not be familiar with Minnesota, where is Richfield located in the state?
So Richfield's an inner ring suburb. It's immediately south of Minneapolis and adjacent to the airport.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, Emily has got some questions here for you, Wayne.
Yeah, so we want to come back to your passion about firefighter health and wellness because you have an amazing story related to that. But before we do, can you please talk about your position as the Emergency Operations Director for the 2026 Special Olympics game?
Sure. Um, Minnesota, the Twin Cities was selected to host the 2026 USA Games. They'll be held in June of 2026. And as part of the games, part of the organization is they create what's called a management operations center. So it's kind of more like along the lines of an emergency operations center or EOC.
Mm.
But the management operations center mock is we're going to run it under a ICS model, and emergency operations is the incident command, and it supports everything non-sport related to the games. And the primary responsibilities for emergency operations are medical and EMS, security, health, and safety. Um, the athletes are a medically fragile community. They have a lot of unique needs. And we have a huge medical component that operates the games. So at the games.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
Wayne, given your background, and how did you get involved with the Special Olympics?
So a friend of mine who's also a retired fire chief, he was recruited as the emergency operations manager, and he realized that the job was just too big. And so he had approached me and said, "Hey, you're looking for a part-time gig for a year. It's a year contract." So I said, "Absolutely. Sounds fun. Let's do it." So
What have been some of the challenges you faced in that position, or is it similar to when you were a fire chief or different?
so I think the biggest challenge is that returning to the private sector from
Mm,
the public sector is a they're different animals in how
mm,
we approach things. You know, when the incident management team goes out on a deployment to a flood or a tornado or a wildfire, whatever it should might be, you know, we build this organization from scratch in you know a matter of days. And you know, here we are we're just under a year out right now, and we're basically building our plan for the games. And you know, the way the private sector plans versus the way the public sector plans, especially when you're looking at, you know, um, incident management team type planning, uh,
mhm.
it's dramatically different. So it's a little bit of getting back used to the private sector.
Yeah. I have a question that I just thought of, because you and I both spent a long time in the fire service. And what was it like for you when you stepped away from it? What challenges did you face?
Well, I think for me, the reason I had to step away is I had some serious health issues, and it
Mm.
wasn't my choice. But it was, you know, I guess the NFPA kind of frowns upon people with defibrillators in their body from being firefighters. So, um, it was rough. You know, you had a podcast talking about resilience, you know,
Mhm,
and it was a very difficult time, you know, having something that meant so much to me, a career that was so fulfilling, suddenly gone, you know,
mm,
and you miss your people, you miss the
Yeah.
station culture, you miss all of that, and you know, you kind of go through a grieving process. You
yeah.
know, not everyone does. Some people are more than happy to walk away and go do something else or be retired. But, you know, other people, it's, you know, working is a component of your life, you know.
Yeah. You know, you gave me an idea here. You know, I've talked about wrestling the gator of fire service retirement in the past, and I've got a class related to that too. And idea that just popped in my mind is if you would be willing to get yourself and a couple others who have spent a long time in the fire service and do a podcast where just bring two, three others on, and we just specifically talk about this and talk about the challenges. Is that something that you would be interested in doing?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, great. I'll look into that. So let's delve a little bit into the Minnesota Firefighter Initiative, the background, the mission, and your involvement with it.
So the Minnesota Firefighter Initiative was founded by three chief officers, George Esbenson, John Wolf, and Mike Dobish. And George was the president of the Fire Chiefs Association, and he realized he got kind of tired of traveling around the state visiting i- injured firefighters in hospitals and going to line of duty death funerals.
Mm.
And he said, "We got to stop the madness. We have to stop
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
madness." So they went to a seminar down in Chicago, the Florian Society, I believe, and they came back and they said, "Okay, this is what we're going to do." And so they started the nonprofit, the Minnesota Firefighter Initiative, to focus on the big three: cardiac, cancer, and emotional health.
Mm.
Mhm.
So they got some grants from some entities in Minnesota, and they built an awareness curriculum around those three things. And then they started the heavy lift, which was getting the Hometown Heroes Assistance Program passed by the legislature.
Mm.
And that was a 3-year effort. And
Wow.
when it finally passed, it's an annual $4 million grant that is administered by the Minnesota by Minfire. That's what we call it up here,
Okay.
and it provides for a critical illness insurance policy for every firefighter in the state.
Mm.
And
Wow.
it's a sliding scale from $250 to 20,000. So if you get diagnosed with cancer, full blown cancer, you get a $20,000 check.
Wow.
If you get diagnosed for PTSD, that's $5,000. So they paid out over $1 million last year
Mm,
in
Wow.
claims.
wow.
It also covers a 24/7 emotional, kind of like an EAP,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
where anybody, firefighter and their family, can call in and talk to a master's level behavioral health professional. And then
Mm.
it also covers up to 5 visits with a trauma-informed behavioral health, clinician.
Mm,
So,
okay.
and it's all free of charge to the firefighter. And then ongoing training and 24/7 peer support program.
Yeah, that's great.
That's
And
incredible.
yeah, and Wayne, related to the cancer um, issue, is it all cancers
Hmm.
or is it just a short list of cancers?
It's all cancers.
Mm.
Okay,
Yeah, and it doesn't, they don't have to prove anything's fire related.
that's
So
great.
yeah,
Wow.
it's just for every firefighter. And it's making a difference, because when I was executive director with the program, I'd go to a lot of different fire events, and conferences, and every time, I could be at a retirement for somebody I knew, and someone I didn't know would come up to me and say, "Hey, Minfire really made a difference in my life. Thank you for what
That's
you're."
great.
So,
That's great. That's great, Wayne, that you've put such a amount of time and effort into something that is so important. But another thought that popped into my mind related to firefighter safety, I often wonder, is it a real thing in the fire service or is it just a lot of smoke and mirrors? And the reason I say that is just taking a look at what has happened so far this year from January 1st right up to today. I get the secret list.
hmm.
I see, what's happening around the country, and we still have firefighter injuries and deaths that are taking place that I believe many of them could be preventable. And one of them is seatbelts. I remember when you and I were at the EFO and Bert Clark had the seatbelt initiative. Every week, every blessed week, I see videos of rigs pulling out of fire stations and firefighters in the back, dressing out, not belted in, or they're arriving on scene. They're opening up the door and they're jumping out while the vehicle is still moving. What are your thoughts about that? Seeing as how you have such a interest in firefighter safety.
Well, I think that's a cultural thing that the individual departments have to, you have to have some of the leaders that might not have a position of authority actually start that initiative and say, we're not going to do this anymore,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and slowly that culture will change. And what was it? One of the phrases I remember from EFO is, no change takes full effect until the last person that was there when the change was made leaves.
Yeah,
So
right.
it takes time. And I mean, that's one of the things that we're seeing with Minfire is the stigma of behavioral health, for example.
Mm.
Mm.
When we started in the fire service, you go on a nasty call and you'd go back to the station, you may sit around the apparatus bay for a little bit or the kitchen table, and you might say something, and the salty old silverback is going to say, well, what did you expect to see, kid?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
nowadays, people are way more open about it, and
Yeah.
we're dealing with it early on, and we're trying to remove that stigma so that, should they get in the jackpot someday, they have the tools and they know where to get the tools,
Mm.
resources to help them. So it takes time. And the same thing with like firefighter cancer and dirty turnout gear and all of that stuff.
Hmm.
I mean, when we started, you couldn't wait to take your SCBA off and you were doing overhaul, you know,
Yeah.
it didn't matter. But now, they're going on a burnt food call and they're on air.
Hmm.
Mm.
So the culture is changing, but it's going to take 20, 30 years for all of it to really change. I mean, one of the overarching goals of Minfire was to make sure that it was to get the cancer incidence rate for firefighters to be the same as the general population.
Oh, well,
Mm.
yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
It is amazing how things changed. I think back, and I initially came in the fire service in 1976. And when I was a firefighter in the Air Force, we kept our linen in the same locker that we kept our bunker gear. in
Yeah.
and didn't even think anything of it. Yeah. And now I look back on that and it's like, that was insanity.
Yeah. Well, now you've got clean zones and stations and no
Mm,
turnout gear in the living area. And I mean, people are recognizing the hazard and they're trying to minimize those risks as much as they can and mitigate it. So
yeah. Oh,
I
that's
think
great.
I
I'm
think
gonna.
we're making I think as a service, the fire service, I think we're making progress, but there's still going to be the knuckleheads out there that are doing stupid stuff. You know?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, always, always. Well, I'm going to turn this over to Emily. She has a few questions for you.
So, what makes you so passionate about firefighter health and wellness?
Well, one of the things I would always tell my firefighters is, the reason we're doing this is so that you can have an enjoyable retirement. You
Mm,
know, whether you're a paid on call volunteer or a career firefighter, you're gone and you're missing a lot of events in your family's
Hmm.
existence in their lives. You
yeah.
could be missing Christmases, you could be missing birthdays, sporting events, plays, whatever. You know, that sacrifice that you're making for the general public, um, I want those firefighters to have a nice, long, healthy, safe retirement, when
Mm,
they leave the fire service because they've earned it.
Mm,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a really good point that you make about the sacrifices that they're making for their personal life to help out the public. We've experienced that as well, being
yeah.
like a firefighter's daughter. So, do you have a story related to this topic, like personally for like health and wellness?
Oh yeah. The reason I ended up leaving the fire service, I'm kind of um, an enigma. I've survived 4 out-of-hospital cardiac arrests.
Four.
Wow.
Wow.
Four. Yeah.
Wow.
Four.
Yeah.
It's two more than I thought.
Yeah. Yeah. The last two were with defibrillators, but fortunately, one was at home and the other was at the equivalent of Bass Pro Shops.
Mm,
So,
Oh, wow.
wow.
yeah.
And were you in your jurisdiction when any of
No,
those occurred?
no. The first one was July 1st of 2020. I was at home. It was right before the 4th of July, which is one of my favorite holidays. Um, I took the garbage out because it was garbage day and I was walking back in and I got a really sharp, heavy chest pain. And then it went away. And I
Mm,
didn't have any, and like, firefighters, they're like, you're not calling unless you're dying or dead, right?
right, right.
So, well, little did I know I was going to die in about a half hour. So,
Mm,
I was sitting in my chair, sending emails, and that's the last thing I remember. My wife found me. She was wondering why I was snoring. She was home working because of COVID,
mm,
and I was agonally breathing. So she
yeah.
yelled for our oldest, who was home, and they pulled me on the floor, and
Mm,
he started doing CPR.
Mm,
Um,
wow.
and so Richfield, the city I worked for, and the city I live in, Edina, are very tight with mutual aid.
mm,
And we happen to live just across a freeway intersection from the main Edina fire station. So, and we're on each other's first alarm assignments.
mm,
So there's a lot of interaction with the two departments. And the lieutenant on duty recognized the address when they toned out the cardiac arrest, and he dumped the station.
mm,
And then dispatch knew it was me because we had, the addresses in CAD, and she
mm,
put that out over the air. And they came in, they shocked me once,
Mm,
then came back, then I went back into VFib. They put me in the back of the rig, shocked me again, and they were going to take me to the hospital, obviously, but I met the protocol for what we call ECMO.
mm,
So up here, there's a program where they basically put you on cardiac bypass, cool you down, then they
mm.
fix your heart, and then they start you back up again. So I met that criteria for ECMO. So they were going to take me down to the University of Minnesota.
wow.
Um, they shocked me the second time in the driveway, then I came to and they pulled the airway. And so I'm laying there, my arms are up in the Lucas, strapped in. I look up at the medic who I knew, and I said, "Hey, did I arrest?" Because the first thing
Huh.
hearing is the first thing sense that comes back at least
Mhm.
for me, in all 4 times. That was the first thing, was I could hear.
Mm.
And I could hear the ambulance, the siren, and I could feel, and then I started feeling it, and I heard him talking, and so I look up at the medic. I go, "Did I arrest?" And he goes, "Yeah, Chief, you had an arrest." And I dropped
Mm.
the F-bomb. So then they kept talking, and then I went back into VFib, but with the Lucas on, and my head was slightly elevated in a device called the Eligard, um, I was conscious.
Wow.
So
Wow.
they start the Lucas again, then all of a sudden I hear him say, "Well, that's the wrong med." And they go, "Well, give it to him anyway." That's what the doc said. So I can't remember what they gave me, but um, Ben Kinney, the medic, goes, "Hey, Chief, this is gonna hurt," and they zapped me again, and I was conscious. And
Oof.
another even worse word, an MF bomb, and got to the hospital. I was talking to the medics. I was talking to everybody, climbed up onto the cath lab, and the docs are there ready to, do their thing and put me on ECMO and bypass. And they're like, "Why is this guy talking?" So
Mhm.
they put in 2 stents. I had an 80% blockage in my lab
Whoa.
maker. They opened
Oh,
me up. I felt great. So I was in the hospital about 52 hours on that one.
Mm.
wow.
About a month later, a little over almost 2 months later, we were driving up to northern Minnesota to a friend's cabin. I was driving, and everything went gray, and
Mm.
the car starts to sway off the road, and my wife looks over and she's like, "Oh man." So she grabs the wheel. We end up 100 feet into this cattail marsh,
Mm.
and she's like, "What am I going to do?" You know,
Mm.
Fortunately, the vehicle behind us had a nurse, and she got out. She tromped right into the thick of it, started doing CPR on me. Um, another sheriff's deputy showed up, but nobody had a defibrillator.
Mm.
Mm.
Finally, a gentleman from the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe does emergency management. A guy named Monty Frank showed up, and he had a defibrillator, and they ended up shocking me 7 times before I
Wow.
finally
Wow.
came back. But Monty, the kind of funny story about that is Monty's doing CPR on me, and I've known him through the Fire Chiefs Association
Mm.
well, I've known Monty now for probably almost 20 years,
Mm.
Mm.
and he didn't recognize me. And so they were asking my wife, all the personal details, what's his name? And she goes, "Wayne Kewitsch." And Monty stops and he looks up, he goes, "This is Wayne?" So I had 15 minutes of hands-only CPR, and I don't
Wow.
have a neurological deficit, so that's pretty amazing.
That's
Wow.
fantastic. Man,
So
wow.
I'm like kind of a poster boy for what you don't want to be when you're a firefighter. So
Well,
Wow.
yeah, and, yeah, Emily, yeah, I know you had another question there too.
Yeah.
yeah,
I
just the other part, that one, they flew me back to the university, and I had one of the same docs as the first
mm.
time.
Mm.
Dr. Yiannopoulos, big Greek guy. He's like, "Chief, why are you back?" And I was going to say, "Warranty work, doc? What the?" But then when I thought about what he was about to do, I was like, "Nah, nah, nah, I'm not going to."
Yeah, yeah.
Did they have to put another stent in?
No, my arteries were all good.
Okay.
They determined that the first event messed up my Purkinje fibers, part of my
Oh.
conduction system. So once they finally I'm on a medical drug regimen now that seems to be working, because
Mm.
I haven't had anything,
Good.
and it's been 4 years
Oh,
in-
good.
since the last one.
Mm.
So since the last one, was that when you had to retire, or were you retired before?
Uh, when they put the defibrillator in, that was going to be the end of it, because the city doc wasn't going to sign off on me. So,
Mm.
Mm. Okay.
Mm.
Wow. So what steps have you taken for your own health and wellness, like given that whole journey and then your initiative with helping the firemen?
I think one of the things is um, I've dropped 60 pounds.
Wow,
Um,
congratulations.
Yeah.
so that's been a big thing. And just working on, my own mental health, going through that process of the retirement, and then getting
Mhm.
getting myself more mentally prepared for the next phase of my life. I'm
Mhm.
a very lucky individual. I mean, most people, as we know, most people don't survive cardiac arrest, and
Right.
most don't come out neurologically intact.
Mhm.
Have
Yeah,
that happen after 4 times,
Mhm.
I think it's a miracle. I thank God.
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, you're a
Absolutely. Yeah.
walking miracle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can see the weight loss, Wayne, when you came onto the screen, because I haven't seen you face to face since we graduated from the program back in 2012, and so I can definitely see it. So congratulations, for that. I have a question related to the response from Adina and Richfield. What was the impact on the firefighters?
Mm,
Oh, yeah. So I think that y- I think, had it gone the other way, I think it would have been, it wouldn't have been good. But
Hmm.
the fact that I survived and was out of the hospital so fast, I think it made people, it did, I think it impacted them in a more positive way.
mm,
And I know there's a lot of firefighters that weren't, necessarily considering taking care of themselves as much as they should and have decided to, okay, we got to do this. We got to take care of
Yeah.
mm,
ourselves. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned initially, when you had that pain, you're right. And I mean, and I'm an example of that myself, not from a cardiac standpoint, but the following year after we graduated from the EFO, uh, Emily, Emily's laughing because she knows how pig-headed I was as my
mm,
health started to deteriorate in January of 2013, and ultimately ended up me spending 6 days in the hospital in
Yeah.
August of 2013 with acute kidney failure and a cancer uh, diagnosis. But it was, and in the past also, first time I had a kidney stone and my wife wanted to call 911, my response, no, 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 no. I
yeah,
know who's on duty. Don't call.
yeah. We're going in the personal vehicle.
And that's exactly yeah
Yeah.
what happened. So Wayne, switching gears here, I want to talk a little bit about leadership. And you've gotten around the state of Minnesota and other areas. What are some of the issues that you see facing the fire service today related to leadership?
I think I think one of the issues possibly right now is that the depth of leadership, there isn't
Mm,
necessarily as much depth as there seemed to be in the past. You always seem to see people coming up through the ranks and getting ready to go to lead. But I don't necessarily see as much of that. Um, and then sometimes the people that want to be leaders don't necessarily have the skill set.
mm-hmm.
Um, and that's on us as leaders to make sure we train them. But
Yeah.
training people in leadership is a very difficult thing, and not everyone can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like, okay, this is how you're going to pull the hose off the truck, or this is how you're going to force this door.
Yeah.
It's a much softer skill. And I think the other thing is people confuse leadership with management a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
They might be a decent manager, but they're not necessarily a leader.
Yeah.
So that I think those are challenges, and I think there's some generational challenges too, because I think people aren't necessarily they're balance. It's good for them because they're balancing their life better, but they're not necessarily as engaged um, in their careers as much as they used to be. They're not
Hmm.
necessarily a student of their career. They
Yeah.
put in their time and then they go home and they like their vacation time and they don't take overtime and things like that. I think there's a lot of challenges with that.
Hmm.
Mm,
Yeah, I know. I've seen that here in Colorado, and I travel about 3 times a year out to California, and I'm seeing that same thing out there as well. This morning, I heard an interesting statistic. I listened to Darren Daly. It was Darren Hardy. He's the publisher or the editor for Success Magazine, and I get his daily uh, reel, for the lack of anything else. And he was saying today that the study has been done and that 82% of this research that was conducted by a company called CMI has found that 82% of people in leadership positions have said they were never trained for it. They
Mm,
were promoted based off of technical skill, or for us in the fire service, not only technical but tactical
Mhm.
tactical ability. And we can look at NFPA 1021 and how much actually is in there, whether it be Fire Officer 1, 2, or 3, that truly addresses leadership.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
would
it's not.
agree. I can totally believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. So bouncing up to when you were the fire chief, what was your greatest challenge as the chief of the department?
I think the I think one of the big challenges for us is, or for when I was at Richfield, was we were a career department in a smaller community that didn't necessarily have much of a commercial tax base.
Mm,
So when we wanted to do things, um, we were challenged to find the revenue to accomplish those goals. Because you didn't want to put it all on the taxpayer because it's Mrs. Smith,
mm-hmm.
and so it was a difficult balancing act between what you wanted to do, what you needed to do, and what you could do, you know.
Okay. Mm,
So,
yeah. Yeah, it's
and
interesting.
the other thing is culturally, we really worked hard to change some of the culture at Richfield,
Mm,
to be proud of being a firefighter, be proud of what you do, um, enjoy coming to work, things like that.
mm.
So,
Your departments out there, yours and some of the smaller ones, are they experiencing issues where firefighters are hired in and they stay for maybe a year or two, and then they decide to go to another department, maybe Minneapolis or St. Paul because they pay more money?
well, the money thing isn't too bad right now because everybody tries to keep it within, a couple percentage points typically. Um, it's more a working conditions thing and what they're going to see and things
Mm,
like that.
okay.
The big change in Minnesota over the last probably 5, 6 years is that when I was hired in 2000, there were maybe only 12 career departments in the entire state.
Oh,
wow.
Um, Now, over the last, 6 to 10 years, um, the recruiting crisis hit a major head, and
mm,
departments just got to the point where they couldn't get staffing, they couldn't respond timely,
Mm,
and they said they had to either add a career component, full-time component, or they would switch completely over to full-time firefighters. So the opportunities to be hired as a career firefighter back in 2000 were very few and far between. So it was like winning the lottery.
okay.
Now there's what we're seeing in Minnesota is a number of the fire departments competing against each other for that pool of applicants.
Mm,
Or somebody, you get young firefighters and they go, well, the grass is greener over there at suburb
uh-huh.
B. And our youngest is a career firefighter in the metro here in one of the suburbs. And, he'll talk about stuff and I'll go, you know what? Every department has issues. You're
Yep.
just going to trade one set of issues for another set of issues. So just remember that, keep that
yeah.
in mind when you move around, if you're going to move around. So,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And something else that, I came to realization here at Loveland Fire because it's it's grown. I mean, it's grown tremendously since I first came on. But I've talked to, the younger firefighters, not only here, but in some of the smaller departments in the areas. I've told them, I says, if you stick around, you're going to get opportunities in a smaller department that will never come to you in a bigger department until you're way down way down the road. It's like I was able to run the hazardous materials team
Mhm.
as a lieutenant. And I know that in other larger fire departments that would have never happened. So there are many more opportunities in a smaller department. Emily?
Yeah. So, can you describe your approach to personal and professional development?
Well, I like to think that I've always been a student, you know, always trying to better myself, always trying to be prepared for the next thing. Um, Take advantage of opportunities that are given to you, uh, you know, and always
Hmm.
be reading. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and pulling in that information and processing it, don't just let somebody tell you something, you know, go out and find it on your own.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the frustrations that I have, Wayne, with firefighters is I don't want to make a blanket statement across the country or across the world, but when it comes down to personal development, a question seems to come up as, well, is the department going to pay for this? Am I going to get overtime for this? What are your thoughts along that lines?
Yeah, I mean, you have that all the time, and that's a constant struggle. And I would look at people that would be come to me with that attitude versus the person that went out and did something on their own and then brought it back, you know. And there's opportunities to study and do things that you don't have to be in overtime. I mean, there's a significant amount of downtime in the evenings,
Hmm.
weekends sometimes when you're done with your daily duties, you know, don't just sit around and waste that time, take advantage of it and, work to better yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So I got one final question here, Wayne, before we wrap up. The EFO.
Hmm.
I really enjoyed the EFO and my time there, getting to know, folks like yourselves and others that, we had in our classes. What was one of your biggest takeaways from that 4 years in the executive fire officer program?
I think the network, it was
Hmm.
a life-changing event for me.
Mm,
Um, it I think the whole thought process behind adaptive leadership.
Yeah.
And then the other piece that I thought was really one little piece, if there's one little thing that came out of there that really changed me was there was a situation in one of the classes, somebody was dominating the discussion and all this stuff. And I went up to the instructor, it was Deborah, and I said, is that me? And she said, no, but Wayne, when you talk, it's like like God coming down saying, this is what it is, it's done, And so I realized, okay, I need to change my approach on how I talk to people if I really
mm.
want to implement change and make change happen in an organization.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I enjoyed it, and and maybe one of these days we can meet up at Gettysburg at the Lincoln Diner, and I could talk you into getting chicken croquets, huh?
Yeah. Or try some Scrapple, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Wayne, thank you very much for your time this morning coming on Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick. We appreciate it. And folks, this is Wayne Kewitsch, a retired fire chief from Richfield, Minnesota, and an incredible four-time survivor
Yeah.
of cardiac arrest. And Wayne, we're glad that you're still here. And any final words before we sign off?
No, just thanks for having me. Emily, it was nice meeting you. And Rick, it's great to see you again.
Yeah,
Nice to
thanks.
meet you.
Thanks a lot, Wayne. I appreciate it. And folks, if you have enjoyed the show here, please like and subscribe. My website and email address is in the show notes. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you later. Bye.